Welcome back to this episode of Your 5-Letter Word. Today, I'm going to cover the 3 fundamentals of good public speaking or good communication, if we want to go there. See, there's this misconception that public speaking really has to be you on a stage in front of other people, or you in front of a large group of people. All eyes on you, and that's public speaking. But that's a misconception. Good public speaking is really the ability to be able to communicate with clarity and with confidence in front of any group of people, whether that's a small team of your coworkers or whether that's online if you're creating content on social media or if you're a fellow podcaster. Essentially, let's get into the 3 ways that you can improve the way that you speak so that other people enjoy listening to you. Let's dive in. Number 1 is your pace. Pace is really how fast or how slow you talk. Some people have a slower pace. They talk a little bit more spaces in between their words. They almost sound like they're thinking the whole time. And likely they are. And then there's people all the way on the other end of the spectrum who have a very fast pace. These are people who talk like this, who talk really, really fast, and all their sentences sound like they're combined, and there's no real breaks between their sentences, and you don't know when one idea ends and another idea starts. Now, that's a very dramatic example of fast pace. But take a look at where you are on the spectrum. Are you a little bit on the slower end, or are you a little bit on the quicker end? Understanding where you're starting from is really key because then you understand where you need to go on the spectrum. So if you are on the lower end and you speak slower, now you understand that you have to go up and you have to learn to speak quicker. Any change that you make will feel uncomfortable at first because it is different, but just keep at it. If you really want to get better at the way that you speak, learn to incorporate different types of pace into your message. So that's where you learn to slow down when you're emphasizing a point, and then pick up the pace and talk a little bit faster when you're excited, when you want to emphasize something else that's, more exciting, better. A different part that's maybe not as relevant as the part where you slow down and really make your point. Okay, so that's pace. How fast, how slow, everything in between, and really the ability to use both, going fast and going slow to your advantage. Okay, number 2 is your volume. If you want to speak better, if you want to sound more confident, if you just want to be perceived as being more confident, you need to up your volume. And again, this is going to feel uncomfortable at first. For many people, it feels like they're screaming. If you're used to talking like this, and then all of a sudden you're talking like this, you feel like you're yelling. But put your own perspective aside. Look at the way that people respond to you when you speak. If you tend to be quieter, if you tend to speak with a lower volume, maybe people are talking over you. Maybe people are overlooking your point. Maybe people are ignoring you because they quite literally don't hear you. And then look at examples of people who tend to speak louder than you do. How are they perceived? If all things were equal between you and them, but they were just simply speaking louder, what effect would that have on the other people around you? Right? Start to notice these things because in most cases, people who speak louder are perceived as being more confident simply because they're taking up that space with their volume, with their speech. Okay? So now that you understand pace and you understand volume, now you can start building them, like Lego building blocks, stacking them on top of each other to really start improving the way that you communicate. Not only are you playing around with how fast and slow you're talking, but now you're getting to the point where you can add emphasis by increasing your volume or add emphasis by decreasing your volume, depending on the point that you want to make. All right? So in action, this might look like speaking a little bit slower and quieter to emphasize something meaningful, and then speeding up and speaking a little bit louder to get through some other information and some main points, and then really emphasizing loudly a dramatic point before you slow down and get quiet and maybe tone it back. Okay? Building blocks of your communication habits. But again, the trick is really becoming aware of where you are on the spectrum of each. Okay, so then building block number 3 is your tone. Tone often gets confused with volume. And really, the difference is your tone is the emotion that your voice is conveying. So think back to when you were a child and your mom or dad called your name. You immediately knew what mood they were in. Why? You were not a mind reader. You were picking up on their tone of voice, right? It's the emotion that your voice is carrying. Have you ever had an instance where you were upset by something and then you had to talk to someone completely unrelated, a third party who had nothing to do with it, but they could tell you were taking your anger out on them because your tone was angry, because that's the emotion that was coming through? Understanding this means you have to be mindful of how you sound when you speak. This is one of the biggest reasons for miscommunication. Your words may be saying one thing, but the tone in which you say them has a completely different meaning. And in most cases, people will pick up on what they're hearing and how it's making them feel rather than what is being said. So let me give you an example. Imagine you have to talk to your coworker and you want to ask them about a project. If you say in an angry tone of voice, like, how's the project going? They might be like, whoa, why are you mad at me? Like, they'll get all defensive instantly based on what you said, based on how you said it, sorry. Versus if you were to say it in a softer tone of like, hey, how's the project going? Then all of a sudden you sound shy and timid. And they might think, oh, is something wrong? Am I doing something wrong with the project that I'm not aware of that you heard and now you're coming at me and asking me in a way that makes me feel like I did something wrong? Your tone of voice implied that, right? Versus, how's the project going? How's the project going? How's the project going? Different tone. But just like these Lego building blocks, they all incorporate into each other. It's very hard to communicate with each of these pieces being separate, right? So when you're starting out, pick one that you are working on. The others will naturally follow. And the better that you get at one, the more you'll start to notice the others being incorporated. And that's when you can start to build and tweak those as well. Your tone, again, it naturally comes through based on the emotional state that you're in. So before you go ahead and initiate a conversation, take a moment and check in with yourself. How am I feeling right now? Because that's how I'm going to sound. And it's that self-awareness and that mindfulness that then gives you the power and the position to be able to change accordingly. Okay, but it starts with that self-awareness, and it starts with intentionally working on each of these building blocks separately so that they can improve together. Okay, so now that you understand the 3 fundamentals of good communication and good speaking, now you can start to work on them in tandem, starting with your pace, adding in your volume, and then your tone. Or you might start with your tone and just really get good at speaking in a way that conveys the emotion you want the other person to feel. If you want the other person to feel like you are caring and you're asking a question from a place of caring about them, work on putting yourself in that emotional state of, okay, I care, and let me demonstrate that with the way that I talk and not necessarily the exact words I'm saying. Okay? Pick one, start there, and they will all build and grow in tandem. Now, before we wrap up, my 5-letter word for you today is build. Again, build. Start with one. That's all you need. It's like a domino effect that will occur. Once you start tipping one over, it will naturally translate into improvement in the other areas, especially the more aware that you become of what is happening. Once you understand your pace, then all of a sudden you're naturally adding in different volume. Once you understand your volume and how you're being perceived based on quite literally how loud or quiet you are, well, then you start to work on that and shift the other paces. Okay? Everything works together once you start building with one habit. And I'll remind you, it's a process. It is hard. Many people give up in the middle. You might feel motivated to start. You might recognize that there's an area of communication that you need support with. You might start working on it, but it is hard to break a habit. Habits have been formed over weeks, months, years, for some people, decades. So give yourself some grace and understand that when you are in the process of breaking a habit while you're building a new one, it is a process. It will not happen overnight. And when it doesn't happen overnight, don't give up. Give yourself the opportunity to truly transform the way that you communicate with others by giving yourself the time to practice, to process, and to change. Okay? Just like a house isn't built overnight, the foundation is laid first, and the foundation often takes the longest. And then once everything is built and the pieces are put together, all of a sudden, the house looks like it's done overnight. But it's not. It's a process, and you are the exact same way. The communication that you aspire to develop within yourself is the house. And right now, you're working on building the foundation. You want that foundation to be solid. You want it to support you as you build the house. You're not going to build a beautiful mansion on a cracked foundation that will fall during the first windstorm. Okay? Don't do yourself that disservice. So take the time you need. Practice, practice, practice. Work on your pace. Work on your volume. Work on your tone. And you will see improvements and you will see changes in the conversations that you're having. But give yourself the time to really build a solid foundation. Okay? Now, if you're wondering how to start, quite literally start. And the best way to do it is to set up your phone and record yourself. You might feel cringy, you might feel icky, you might feel embarrassed. But if you can push through, if you can continuously push through and make it a habit, you will see change. And you'll see change so much faster than other people because a lot of people give up in that middle, in that stage where it feels awkward and they're not sure if it's working and it's hard. That's where most people quit. But you're not most people. Okay? I repeat, you are not most people, and you are capable of changing, and you are capable of improving. Give yourself the time, the patience, and the practice. Okay? Record yourself on a regular basis. Watch those recordings back. Listen to those recordings. Take notes. Find one place where you could have done better and practice it. Start to notice the conversations that you're having. When the conversation is finished, reflect on it. What could you have done differently? How could you have said something a little bit differently? It's those moments of self-reflection and self-awareness that will truly lead to change. Because you don't know what you don't know, and you can't change what you're not aware of. So when you take the time to stop, even if it's just for a minute or two, and think about, okay, this is how I said this. This is how I could have said it better. Let me rehearse it a few times. Next time a similar situation comes up, you will say it better. You may not go from 0 to 100, but you will go from 0 to 10, and 10 to 25, and 25 to 60. Okay? You can do this. You are capable of doing this. You just need to put in the practice. All right? You've got this. So go ahead and build those communication skills. I'll talk to you in the next episode. Take care.